My husband, Arthur, was a man of gentle smiles and a perpetually worried brow, a combination that had seemed endearing when we first met. That was before I truly understood the source of that worry, his mother, Eleanor, and her looming presence over our lives, like the shadow of Blackwood Manor, her ancestral home, where we were foolishly persuaded to settle. Eleanor wasn't just a mother, she was a puppeteer, and Arthur, bless his heart, seemed to dance to her every tune. Even 3 years into our marriage, her influence permeated every corner of our existence. A minor disagreement about the placement of the throw pillows? Arthur would be on the phone to Eleanor, soliciting her opinion, turning what should be a small domestic matter into a dramatic production with her as the director. If we couldn't agree on a restaurant for a casual Friday dinner, Eleanor's voice would be ringing in his ear, convincing him to choose the place she preferred. It was as if she was the third, invisible member of our marriage, constantly whispering instructions from the sidelines. But the everyday annoyances were just the tip of the iceberg. Arthur consulted Eleanor on the most basic of decisions. If a business trip was coming up, he would seek her blessing. If we wanted to attend a friend's wedding, he'd first call to ascertain if Eleanor felt it was an appropriate use of our time. One night, we had planned a movie night at home. I'd set up a comfy blanket fort in the living room with popcorn and drinks, and we were about to pick a film when Arthur got a call. It was Eleanor, saying it was too late for such frivolous activity. At 9:45 p.m., he actually told me that movie night was canceled because he had to go to bed. He's 32 years old. The worst part? Every night, at precisely 10 p.m., Eleanor would call, dictating bedtime. And Arthur, without fail, would drop whatever we were doing and dutifully head to bed, often leaving me with a half-finished conversation and a growing sense of isolation. I had tried countless times to talk to him about this. Instead of engaging with me, he would call his mother to explain how difficult I was being. On the single occasion I persuaded him to try setting boundaries, he called Eleanor only to return 20 minutes later, parroting her words about me trying to control and manipulate him. To truly grasp the extent of Eleanor's overbearing nature, you have to know some specifics. When Arthur and I were dating, we had planned a weekend escape to the coast. I was thrilled. I envisioned a quaint seaside cottage, the sound of the waves, a rare moment of peace just for us. But before any of the arrangements were finalized, Arthur mentioned that he had to run it by his mother first. I chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Instead, he called her. Eleanor, it turned out, deemed the cottage too secluded and unsafe, and declared that her precious boy would be much better off within the familiar confines of the city. Arthur promptly canceled our plans. When I asked if he actually wanted to go to the cottage, he just shrugged. It doesn't matter what I want. Mother said no. That's all there is to it. We ended up spending the weekend in a local hotel, the only place his mother deemed acceptable. I should have seen that as a red flag, a blaring siren, but I didn't. During our dating period, there were constant calls from Eleanor, checking in, reminding him to take his vitamins or avoid certain foods. I dismissed them as quirks. I thought that once we were married, she would fade into the background, a background figure to our new life together. But I was wrong. Eleanor's influence only intensified, and our marriage felt like a battleground where I was constantly fighting against a phantom adversary. Things reached a breaking point on our anniversary. It was our third, and I had planned an evening at the local theater, followed by a stay at a historic inn nearby. I was excited to see his face, to show him that I remembered what was important to us, but when I came home, Arthur was nowhere to be found. I called him, and he confessed he'd forgotten our anniversary. He was having dinner with his mother, who had had a bad day and needed company. When Arthur finally came home, I was livid. Our anniversary was supposed to be ours. I told him how much the day meant to me, but he grew defensive, reverting to the familiar script of justifying his mother's actions. Instead of apologizing, he called Eleanor, complaining about my unreasonable reaction. That was it. I marched into the room, snatched the phone from his hand, and told Eleanor that she needed to stop meddling. Eleanor was incensed. She accused me of being jealous and trying to break them up. We had a shouting match, while Arthur stood frozen between us, looking utterly lost. The next day, Eleanor showed up unannounced. She walked in as if she owned the place and proceeded to pick apart every aspect of my life, from my cooking to my wardrobe. She scrutinized the meal I had prepared, a dish Arthur loved. Her face crumpled as soon as she tasted it. "It's too bland," she announced with disgust. She told him it was not nourishing enough and that he should consider cooking for himself. The following week, Eleanor insisted Arthur meet her for tea, despite knowing we had plans. She invited me along, with an affected sweetness in her voice, but upon our arrival, she barely acknowledged me, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. I wore a simple dress, a casual outfit I had picked out for the weekend. "Well," she started, "that's a choice. Most women are more careful with their appearance nowadays, but it seems you don't prioritize the same things as the rest of us." She then turned to the cashier, wanting to see if they agreed with her. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as I was openly shamed in front of a stranger. As time passed, Eleanor became more and more blatant in her attempts to undermine me. She would make comments about my cooking, suggest I dress differently, and even dictate our bedtime. She was trying to push me out of my own home and take over the role of the woman of the house. I tried talking to Arthur, but he would side with her every time, saying, "She means well," or "She's just trying to help." I finally told Arthur that he had to choose, me or his mother. I couldn't live like this any longer. I was done with our marriage being a tug-of-war, where the other side was his mother. Arthur, torn, said he would talk to his mother, but this resulted in another disaster. Eleanor was furious. She threatened to cut him off if he chose me over her. She also started spreading lies about me to our friends and family. One evening, Arthur's cousin, Clara, called. It seems Eleanor had told her that I was a terrible wife who couldn't cook, dress appropriately, and kept Arthur up too late at night. When I started explaining the situation, I could sense her discomfort, but she seemed to understand at the end of the call. Soon after, I had a meeting with my boss. It seems that someone had called my job, made false claims about my performance, claiming I was unreliable, messy, and that I argued with my colleagues all the time. It didn't take long for me to figure out Eleanor was behind this. I got called into my boss's office and was told that there had been some concerning reports about my behavior. As a result of these false claims, I was forced to attend mandatory workplace conduct training. That was the last straw. I felt my job, my life was threatened. I was terrified. I was finally pushed to my limit. I sought legal advice and decided to seek a restraining order. I knew it was drastic, but I didn't know what else to do. When I went to serve it, Eleanor snapped. She became physically violent, pushing me and grabbing my hair. The police were called, and she was arrested for assault. Arthur was in shock. He couldn't believe how far she had gone. For the first time, he saw how toxic her behavior really was. He went to visit her in jail, hoping to talk some sense into her, but she refused to apologize. She told him he was making a huge mistake and would regret choosing me over her. Arthur, heartbroken, had to face the devastating reality he had been avoiding for so long. He had to choose between his mother and his wife. After a long, tearful conversation, he made the difficult decision to cut ties with his mother for the sake of our marriage and his own happiness. It was agonizing, but he knew it was right. Arthur's journey was a harrowing one, a painful lesson in breaking free from the chains of familial codependency. His initial blindness to the toxicity of Eleanor's behavior is not uncommon. It's a testament to how deeply ingrained unhealthy patterns can be. His willingness to appease Eleanor was not an act of love but of avoidance, the inability to confront the pain of severing those deeply embedded ties, even when those ties were suffocating him. My journey was one of survival. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries and fighting for your own well-being. It wasn't about hate, it was about recognizing a system of abuse for what it was. I learned that love should be about mutual respect and support, not control and manipulation. I realized I was not being disrespectful by asking to have my own thoughts, opinions, and agency in my life. It was about finally seeing myself as someone who deserved to be loved with respect and not just tolerated. The shadow of Blackwood Manor still lingers, but Arthur and I are no longer living in its darkness. It is a reminder of what we had to overcome to build a healthy relationship. It taught us the importance of communication, honesty, and, most importantly, the courage to break away from the toxic chains of the past. It also taught us that blood does not give anyone a free pass to hurt others. Family should be a source of love and support, not manipulation and control. We were both guilty of not setting boundaries, but now, we strive to be better for each other and for ourselves, and that's where hope lies, in our ability to learn, grow, and choose a better path for ourselves, even when the road ahead is difficult.